Hello. Hello and welcome to Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church of Pasadena. Welcome to all members, friends, and guests here in person or virtually. Neighborhood Church creates and grows an inclusive community of faith connected by love, spirit, and service. My name is Ellen Rosenblatt, and I am a member of your Board of Trustees. Today's service is led by our interim minister, Reverend Dr. Teresa Cooley, who is joined by our music director, Dr. Zenaida Robles, and our talented staff musicians. Please silence your devices as we begin our service. Thank you for joining us as we continue to prioritize connection over perfection. This is a hybrid service, which is being streamed on YouTube and recorded for future viewing. Seating is available in the back if you prefer not to appear on the recording. We intend to continue to learn and adapt in order to continue to create joyful opportunities to be together while keeping our community safe. There are many ways to connect with our church community throughout the week, both in person and online. Whether you are new here or ready to find new ways to engage, please visit our website and our social media to learn more. And our website is neighborhooduu.org, spelled as one might expect. Today, I'm excited to announce that Esperanza is back and is planning a house-building trip to Tijuana for the last weekend in October. If you're interested in learning more about this meaningful and immersive weekend, look for Wendy Wilson or Trace Izzard at the social justice table after the service. I can attest it's a fantastic weekend. You'll get very tired and very happy. Also, after this service, we will be making posters for the Reproductive Rights March, which is being held on October 2nd. We will be participating in a caravan along with Planned Parenthood. And you can see our newsletter or talk to Luis for details about where we'll be meeting, etc. Also, Wells is hosting a fundraising event, a concert on 10/2 in the evening of the day of the march, so you could do both, beginning with reflective music at the Labyrinth at 6 p.m. and then moving indoors for more music. Neighborhood Church upholds a covenant of right relations through which we commit to act so that the needs of the individual and those of the greater faith community can be in harmony. We covenant to honor one another, engage one another, and give to one another and to our institution. Again, welcome to Neighborhood Church, whoever you are and wherever you are on your spiritual journey. Welcome to this inclusive faith community connected by love, spirit, and service.
Good morning. It is still morning, isn't it? You have totally brightened up this gloomy day, so very happy to see you with us this morning. Our invocation comes from the poet and visionary Starhawk. We are all longing to go home to some place we have never been, a place half remembered, half envisioned. We can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throat. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing, a circle of friends. Someplace where we can be free. Let us worship together.
Good morning. Our opening hymn is number 187 in your gray hymnals. Please turn to page 187 and please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing It Sounds Along the Ages.
Good morning again. I'm Andy Eaton, a member of the Share the Plate project. And just reminding you, share the plate. Every week, our entire offering goes to support community programs dominated by members of the congregation. You can either make your gifts directly in the donation box, which will be out there, not up here, at the entrance to the sanctuary following the service, or you can donate electronically by text or on the neighborhood website, which will show up in a moment. This week and next week, our Share the Plate offering goes to support Mary's List, that's M-I-R-Y, as opposed to Mary's List, a local support group for refugees. Neighborhood has a long tradition of supporting refugees, from our assistance with a Syrian family a long time ago to our direct support of Rosa, a Honduran refugee, and her family a few years ago. Mary's List basically provides this support in a much larger, organized way. With the recent influx of Afghan refugees, this support is extremely timely. We previously provided support for Mary's List a few years ago as part of our alternative gift market. Mary's List supports refugees in multiple ways. When refugees first arrive, they're in survival mode, often lacking the necessities, anything from diapers for young children to beds, and Mary's List provides much-needed support. Once a family's moved beyond survival mode into what Mary's List refers to as the hive mode, where they're trying to build a social support structure, Mary's List helps refugees rebuild their lives by providing everything from tutoring to social support. Finally, in what we all hope becomes the thrive phase, where families are settled and looking to know how they themselves can give back, Mary's List helps by offering special classes, supper club catering, volunteering and working opportunities at Mary's List directly, and other programs to make families feel comfortable in their new homeland. Mary's List uses crowdsourcing and social media to connect people like us who want to help with new refugee families who have unique needs. Mary's List creates target wish lists, so if you want to make more or do more beyond your monetary offering today, just check out the Mary's List website, M-I-R-Y, and you don't need the apostrophe. Please give generously. Thank you.
Please join me in the spirit of prayer, meditation, reflection. Let us ground our bodies and open our spirits. As I share this prayer from John Rodell. O Spirit, help me grow a grove of kindness that stretches from valley to valley. O divine light, help me become an arborist of hope, whose redwoods hold tree house chapels where the congregants hold hands and count each other's tears. O mysterious love, help me cultivate a vast wilderness of empathy and mercy, whose soft bark smells like Easter lilies, and where the blooms yawn themselves awake while singing cosmic psalms. O unending Creator, help me become a courageous Johnny Appleseed that refuses to cut down trees to build an ark out of my self-righteousness, or I could float away on the suffering of this world. O mystical mover of my heart, teach me how to let every word I utter be a source of shade instead of a cause for shame. Before I return to the source, I want to plant roots of love so deep into this world that they get tangled up in the mantle and keep the world from spinning quite as madly as it does today. This is my purpose, to turn my acorns into action, to turn goodwill into a giant sequoia, to turn branches into bright pew benches, to turn judgment into a jungle of kindness. Amen. I know many of us enter into this space today with loved ones on our hearts, loved ones who may be suffering, loved ones who may be celebrating, loved ones that we have perhaps sadly lost. So let us welcome into the silence for a moment those loved ones on your minds and hearts. And if you choose after the service, you can write that joy or sorrow into the book of life that is out in our foyer so pastoral care can know what's happening in your lives. So let us join in a moment of silence as we bring these into our loving community. Amen.
Come my way, my truth, my life, such a way as gives us breath, such a truth as ends all strife, such a life as killeth death. Come, my light, my feast, my strength, such a light as shows such a strength as makes his guest. My joy, my love, my heart, such a joy can move, such a love as none can part, such a heart as joys in love.
Our reading this morning comes from my colleague, Nancy Bowen. Congregations are purposefully positioned to mediate between the private and public realms of human life. They sit at that liminal place where the public and private spheres are bridged. The congregation is a transition place between our intimate life with family and friends and the great public sphere that is the world. In our covenantal theology, we try to nurture each person individually so that each may minister to a hurting world. If part of our mission is witnessing to all that we must hold the world in our hands, then we must hold the stranger in our congregations. No small task, this fragile art of hospitality. Historically, this radical notion of hospitality to the stranger is the cornerstone to civilization. It was a necessary norm if travel and commerce were to replace conquest. It is mentioned countless times in Hebrew and Christian scriptures. Virtually all of those references link hospitality to the stranger with unexpected blessing. Abraham and Sarah brought word of the birth of a son. Later, Abraham was allowed to bury Sarah, and the choice failure to provide hospitality was one of the sins that prompted the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The Israelites were reminded repeatedly that they had been strangers in Egypt and poorly treated, so they must not do the same to the strangers they met. The Samaritans were in all ways considered disreputable until Jesus made a Samaritan the hero in a parable. The primary understandings of Jewish and Christian religious responsibility involve doing the right thing for a stranger. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. A healthy spiritual path will bring each of us into relationship with the world and into contact with the stranger. And so, consistently, the saving message is, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares.
Our meditative hymn is number 86 in the gray hymnal. Right from your seats, please join me in singing hymn number 86, Blessed Spirit of My Life, number 86.
When I lived in Arlington, Virginia, just before I moved here, there was a lovely young family that was next door to me. And in particular, there was a little boy who was about 4 to 5 years old, who was the most extroverted child I have ever met. Whenever I ran into him, he would start telling me all kinds of very involved stories, like the one about the family vacation that they had just taken, including the uncle who passed out drunk. I'm sure his mother and father wouldn't have been thrilled knowing that he would tell me these stories, but I was completely charmed. I enjoyed all of our conversations. But when the pandemic began in earnest, I ran into my little friend on the sidewalk, and instead of greeting me with another story, he cried, "Germs, germs," and ran inside. I realized then that this pandemic was going to affect more than just our physical health, but that our individual and collective psyches were at risk. And that's clearly been the case. Increases in anxiety and depression, substance abuse, and even suicide have all been documented. I know I have felt a certain despair at times, even when I've been able to rise up out of it. We don't need to be given detailed descriptions of the psychological impact of this pandemic because we all know and experience and live it. But the effect I want to focus on today is just what I described about my little next-door neighbor. We've been implicitly taught to fear one another. And I can completely understand those of you who've decided not to risk any close encounters, and do not blame you at all. And I'm impressed at the courage that has brought you to church this morning. It takes effort to break out of those bubbles that we have created around ourselves. You connect online and you come here in person in order to remember we are not alone. I've seen the joy that lights up your faces when you greet old friends who were desperately missed. I know how much this community means to so many of you. You have a deep love for one another, even when you don't always agree. We've also had a number of new visitors in the last few weeks, which I am thrilled about. So to those of you who are visiting, welcome. I'm assuming you came because you understand the deep need that we all have for community, all the more intently given what we have just gone through. I often say that there is no such thing as the church. It's not a static thing, but a living and breathing organism that changes constantly. There's a certain personality to a church, that is for sure, but that personality would wither and die without new people coming in, bringing new perspectives. And while I know this can be a community, a tight community with deep, deep connections, which is indeed a wonderful thing, I want to suggest that that is not our ultimate purpose as a church. We're not just about creating a substitute family or automatic opportunities for friends. That is important, but I understand our mission as greater than that. Otherwise, we would simply be a social club. What I believe makes us a religious community is the opportunity to put ourselves in relationship to something larger than ourselves, to find some meaning that comes to us not just through the known and the comfortable, but often most profoundly through the unknown. We confront our deepest selves and notions about others through our interactions with strangers as much as with friends. I learned this in a profound way when I was just a teenager. It's a lesson that's been easy for me to forget about at a time when I mostly just want to protect myself. But it changed my life for the better. And I tell the story of it now to remind myself of its impact, as well as to illustrate something to you. And some of you have already heard this story. I was 16 years old, and I had just gotten my driver's license. I somehow convinced my mother that it would be okay for me to drive out to the country to pick up a friend of mine and go to the county fair. My friend lived about 20 miles outside of town, and in Texas, 20 miles is known as next door. The route to her place took me past oil refineries and pool halls and a few scattered farmhouses. Given where I lived on the Gulf Coast, most of these country roads were paved with oyster shells. And occasionally oyster shells can be a little slippery if you're not paying attention all the time, which clearly I wasn't, because as I went around a curve, my wheels slipped under me and pushed me over on top of a culvert where my front wheels lay spinning. So there I was, a 16-year-old in the total dark of night, in the middle of nowhere. I was stranded. I stood on the road and tried to figure out where to go. Of course, these were the days when cell phones were just a gleam in an inventor's eye. So I started walking toward one of the farmhouses that I could see in a distance, but as I got closer, I could hear a dog barking wildly, and I didn't particularly want to encounter a protective dog. So I turned around and went back toward the pool hall that I had passed just a mile back, and I walked into this smoky hall with great trepidation. I'd seen dozens of Harley Davidsons in the parking lot, and sure enough, the first group of people I saw when I came in looked just like a motorcycle gang. Leather outfits and tattoos with spikes on their wrists. And that was way before tattoos were cool for most people. So, of course, I immediately attracted attention. Not only was I clearly out of place, but I'd hit my forehead in the accident and I had blood trickling down my face. And so these guys who seemed about 10 feet tall surrounded me, asking what happened, and I think I was just frozen to the spot. A woman bartender who was the epitome of the stereotype, rough-voiced and big-haired, came to my rescue and sat me down with a soda. And the guys still surrounded me and asked if I wanted them to go and get my car for me. And I just squeaked, "I think I'll call my mother." So as I sat and waited for my mother to come, I started to relax because they could not have been kinder. When my mother finally arrived, all of them followed us out to my car, all 20 of them, because one of them had a tow truck, and they towed my car back to town, all 20 of them following all 20 miles, and refused payment of any kind. I can't tell you how profoundly this affected me, because it should have been those middle-class people in the farmhouse that I would have turned to, but they were too protected for me to have access. Instead, it was the people that I had always been taught to look out for, who were often portrayed as dangerous, who ended up being my savior. I've had other experiences, not necessarily as dramatic as that, but which taught me over and over again that the best way to shake me out of my comfortable assumptions about what connects us in the deepest sense and what community is really all about is found with the unlikeliest of people. The neighborhoods that were the friendliest and most cooperative, in my experience, were the most diverse. Times like now, where I live close to people who look a lot like me, conversely can make me feel the most isolated. I've only met one neighbor on my little dead-end street. We take so much for granted about one another when we seem the same. I think one of the reasons this is on my mind right now is the daily reminders of the desperate struggles of those who are fleeing destitution and privation and violence, those who try to come to our country only to be violently rejected, or if they do make it in, are met with racism, xenophobia, abuse. These people are part of our human family. And not only do they deserve safety, they have something really important to offer us: a better understanding of the human community. Mary Catherine Moore, the president of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, whom many of you know, said, "When people defy persecution and injustice by seeking asylum across borders, they are defending the human rights and dignity that we all wish for ourselves and our loved ones. Refugees, migrants, asylum seekers are not a threat. They are a spiritual gift to a nation that has too often lost sight of its own humanity." Universalist, the organization that we are supporting in our Share the Plate efforts these next 2 weeks, is an example of a group that recognizes this gift that they bring through their important work. And so I encourage your support, not just monetarily, but also voluntarily. It's the very work that the Building Bridges Task Force have been engaged in for the last 10 years. It's the very work that the Esperanza trip also addresses. And all of those efforts welcome your participation. There are strangers near at hand as well. People who haven't always felt completely comfortable in a UU church, that on the surface doesn't seem like it has much diversity. As we're beginning to embrace the implications of adopting the eighth principle, which makes us pledge to devote ourselves to dismantling racism and examining our own systems of white supremacy, we will have to really recognize that it is not just about us, those who are already among us. The deeper part of this work is to really take apart our understanding of who us is and open ourselves up to different ways of doing things, things that we can only learn when we begin to truly welcome the unexpected guest. It seems a very tall order indeed right now to even consider opening ourselves up to something different. We learned above all, as I said, to keep ourselves safe. And I share that sense of caution and unease being out in the world again. So I'm not suggesting we fling open our arms and embrace everyone and the whole world community, but I am asking myself and us to make some conscious effort to gradually let down the barriers, even if it's just to read a book about someone different from yourself. It will not be easy, and it cannot happen overnight, and some of us have a greater need for safety than others through no fault of your own. But if we don't begin to confront and start to shift that now deeply embedded instinct to run screaming from others, like my little neighbor, I think our souls will start to shrivel. Can we dare to risk creating the kind of community that makes the stranger into a neighbor and a friend, that seeks the kind of connection more profound than simply sharing the same backgrounds, that allows us to open ourselves up to the divine spirit that grows between stranger and friend? This does not only have to happen in person. The pandemic has taught us that we can indeed create real connections online, virtually, that can still be deeply meaningful. We keep saying that we cannot return to the old normal, and that will indeed be our greatest temptation. The question is, can we have the courage to create a new normal that transcends old boundaries and brings new life to our deepest aspirations? We can but only begin to try. So may it be.
Our closing hymn is number 113 in the gray hymnal, number 113. Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing, "Where is Our Holy Church?" number 113.
As he
Please be seated. Our benediction comes from the wonderful writer Barbara Kingsolver, and it's called Hope, an Owner's Manual. Look, you might as well know this thing is going to take endless repair. Rubber bands, crazy glue, heartstrings, sunrise, all of these are useful. Also feathers. To keep it humming, sometimes you have to stand on an incline where everything looks possible on the line you drew yourself. You might have to pop the clutch and run past all of the evidence, past everyone who is laughing or praying for you. Definitely, you don't want to go directly to jail. But still, here you go, passing time, passing strange. Don't pass those up. In the worst of times, you will have to park it and fly by the seat of your pants, tiptoe past the dogs of the apocalypse that are sleeping in the shade of your future. Pass your hope like a bad check. You might still just have enough time to make a deposit. If someone says your money or your life, you may have to choose life and mean it. Amen. Go in peace. I'll hear more from Wells next Saturday evening. I look forward to greeting you outside. If you want a hug, I'm very happy to give them. If not, just simply give me a nod, that's fine as well.